Everybody, this is Sean. In today's video, I'll be taking you through creating an advertising cloud dashboard within Adobe Analytics. Learning objectives today, we'll be discussing the difference between a report and an analysis. We will explain how to set this report up for success, and then we will jump into Adobe Analytics and I'll explain how to use your advertising cloud data within it. So the first thing we want to do is establish what a dashboard is. A dashboard is a concise report that lets us see how we're doing against our goals and objectives. These goals and objectives were predefined by the key stakeholders or identified within your pre-launch analyses. These are sent on a recurring cadence, so maybe once a week or once a day. And it provides the opportunity to ask deeper questions. These deeper questions will become your analyses. So if you find something off or not going towards the goal as it should go, you can dive in deeper. You can use Adobe Analytics or you can use other tools to figure out maybe why. So that's what we would call an analysis. Setting this report up for success, we want to clearly define the KPI of the campaign. Like I stated in the last slide, this is very important to making your dashboards or your recurring reports more useful. So in those pre-launch analyses, they're talking to your clients, you understand what our campaign is designed to achieve. And then we clearly illustrate this KPI within the report. So within this report on the right, everything that is displaying here is designed to show me how my campaigns are performing, but how it's driving towards the main KPI. So as an example, my main KPI is actually booking starts. And I want to keep that at top right. Everything below it is going to support the things with the main KPI. So my visit rates, my flows for yesterday. And I can even see hourly, what we're doing within the hour. So everything within this report is going to give you a really quick snapshot in terms of how my ad cloud campaigns are driving towards that main KPI. So benefits for this type of report, it's going to provide a recurring report to key stakeholders on the current performance of a campaign. It's going to let us monitor items of this report that are influencing the campaign. And it's going to tie everything back to downstream Adobe Analytics data. So with ad cloud integrated with Adobe Analytics, for every click-through or view-through, we'll be able to tie all those IDs to whatever's going on the site. So it gives us a lot of great opportunities to show, coming off of those view-throughs or click-throughs, what page they enter from, and then everything they do after that, and shows us how it's getting to the main KPI. Okay, now I'm in Adobe Analytics, and we're going to take you through how to start to create your dashboard. So one of the first things I'll do is I will take my panel and I will edit the description. You can do that by right-clicking and saying edit description. And in here, and this is what's going to be really useful for your recurring reports, is it's going to just state the campaign goals. So if your goal is to drive revenue with an AOV of X, your campaign goals will say it. You can also put in your flight dates, your start dates, your budgets, any other things that you think will be useful for somebody who may not be as familiar with the campaign, receiving the report, that you can put it here. So the next thing we want to do is we want to start to customize this dashboard to fit your needs. So what I typically like to do is I like to go to my settings and I like to set the density to comfortable. But I also like to change the color palette to match that of the brands. So you can do that very easily by using a tool like this hex color. Let me get out of full screen. I have a little button up here that will actually inform me towards the colors of each of these. So if I were to say I want to create dashboards that have the color of this black one, right? It lets me know what that hex color is. Or maybe this blue up here. It will let me know that hex color is. I just paste these hex colors into it and it allows me to create brand colors for each of my dashboards. So you can jump onto a client's website, start to pick out colors and customize it more towards their needs. The next thing I'll do is I will create a custom date range. So I have date ranges down here, and you can see I have two created already. One is a total flight date, one is a rolling daily. So you can do that by clicking the plus button, and just based on what the flight date is, you can set that here. And if you want to create it for rolling, you can say, well, let me do a fix for when I start the campaign. But besides that, keep the dates rolling every day. So I can say minus 1 day, and this will update it. So the fixed date will always be March 1st, but each day I come in, it's going to update the report in the database on the rolling. You can save that, and then basically what I do is I'll just take this and I'll just drag it on my panel. So I'll take the total flight date, either the rolling or the total, and I'll drag it into the date range area. So those are three main things you can do to start out with your dashboard. But what now we want to start to do is we want to actually start to create our dashboard. So what I usually like to do is I like to create my raw data tables. So I have 5 right here, and depending on what you're trying to create, you might have more or less. So I have my raw campaign summary data, I have my weekly trend data, I have my spend pacing tables, my raw targeting data, and then my product data, so what products I'm actually selling. So I'll start out with the raw campaign summary. I can open up this data table, and I can see I have my main metrics. These are some of the main metrics I'll utilize when creating my dashboards. So now that they're here, it's really just a process of right-clicking, visualizing summary number. So what we can do is we can do an example with cost. I can right-click on the cost, I can visualize it, and then I can put a summary number. I can resize it, stick it right here, and say I want my spend to be here. So now I have my total spend during that flight date that we created. And we also remove this down here if you want to clean it up a little bit. I want to remove the legend, but then we need to lock it. So if I were to start clicking around, this is going to update it. So what I actually want to do is I want to lock this data set. So I can hit this on the top left and hit lock selection. Now I have it locked. I can move around and this is going to stay where it is. So I know this is going to keep being total spend based on the date ranges. What you can do from here is I usually like just duplicate this. It keeps the sizing the same. So you can duplicate the visuals. And if I wanted to do this for impressions, basically what I can do is just unlock this selection. And now I just click the impressions, and now I have my impression data. So I can stick in total impressions. That's locked. So I have 2 quick ones right there. The next thing I want to start to do is start to populate this section over here. This is typically where I like to put my revenue. So I usually like to have my revenue or my main KPI up in the top right, much bigger than the other ones. So let's create that really quickly. I can right click, duplicate this. And like I said, I like it to be a little bigger. So I might make this size and move it underneath. And then I will unlock this and I will say that that's my revenue. Total revenue. So what I have on top here are just summary numbers. What I want to start to maybe do is trend this out a little bit. So I typically like to keep things in the same column. So I'll have my spend here, but then I'll have my spend changes week over week. I'll have my impressions here, and my impression changes week over week. So let's do that. So let's open up our raw week summary data, and I see my spend here. So I have 2 weeks. So with this demo account, I couldn't actually put last week or 2 weeks ago, but what you would typically do within a dashboard is you would find your last week and your 2 weeks ago date ranges, and you stick them here. But just to convey the point, what you would have is 2 rows of columns. And I want to say, well, what's my spend change between costs? So I can right click on both of these, and then I can say, let me visualize this with a summary change number. Let's stick that here. Resize it underneath the spend. So now I have spend change week over week. So if I want to do this for revenue now, let me just lock this, and I want to duplicate this visual so I can keep the same size. I'm going to stick it underneath revenue, unlock it, and then highlight the revenue. So I can highlight this data, and depending on how you select it, it's going to change it. So if I click this April 21st to April 14th, it's going to change the data, but I want to change the week over week. So from the 14th to the 21st, it's going to say, well, our revenue is actually down week over week. So let me lock that. And then usually like to have a CPM metric here if that's the main thing you want to do. So let's visualize that CPM. I can duplicate this, unlock it, hit my CPM, and lock that. And then lastly, I'm going to put in my ROAS. It's over here. All right, so we can see what we have here. We have spend, change week over week. We have impressions, total impressions by CPM. My main KPI, my changes in the KPI. Should change this to ROAS. And the total KPI. I'll change the revenue actually. So I have this big hole here. What can I fill that with? Likely, what I usually do is I will use the clicks or view-throughs. So I just want to get a feel for how many clicks or view-throughs are entering the site. So what I can do is I can highlight both these data. This is my view-through data, my click-through data. So a view-through being someone who was exposed to my ad and then came to my site, or someone who was exposed to my ad, clicked on that ad, and then came to the site. So let me take both these data points. I'm going to visualize this with perhaps a donut. And it will just fit nicely into this gap. So I can lock this, enter type. So right now this is telling me that 51% of the time, 54% of the time, someone who was exposed to my ads actually viewed through the site. And then 45% of the time, someone's actually clicked through. You can update these labels. So maybe I want to get rid of AMO, and I just want to say, well, let's just do view through. So I can update that. I can add that label and do view through. There's a lot of right clicking involved. One of the main things you can learn from this is, when in doubt, right click, and you can probably find the data you need. Okay, the next portion of this is we want to start to fill in our spend pacing. So I just want to report on my daily spend goals or remaining spend, and just so I can watch it and make sure that I'm spending at an even pace. So I actually have a table here called raw spend table. And within another video, you'll find ways to create this. But basically what this table does is it gives me my cumulative spend and just adds it up day over day, my days left, my total spend throughout the flight, and then based off those metrics, I'm able to create a couple others, right? So spend remaining, my daily spend goal, and then I have some static numbers here in terms of my budget, which is 400,000 as an example, or just 100% static. So let's create a visual that will look at cumulative spend versus remaining spend, and then our total budget. So I can just highlight each three of these, and then I can right click that, and I can visualize that with a line graph. So I'll stick it on here because I have my data on the left. So what you will usually find with this type of graph, in this demo account, things are pretty perfect, right? But for the most part, you might find that it's going to be a lot more curved out in terms of actually hitting your daily spend goal. In a perfect world, it would be a perfect straight line crossing in the middle. But for this example, just keep in mind that it may not look as straight as this. So like I said, if you want to update these names, you can edit the label so it's a little cleaner, so you can keep that in mind. And then let's lock that. The other one I like to have is my daily spend to goals. So daily spend goal, right? And then I have my percentages. And then I have the 100% stack. And this is going to help me visualize it a little better. So I can view this as a line as well. So in theory, if you were pacing perfectly, you'd be hitting this purple line every day at 100%. Like I said, that's not usually where you're going to find happen. And in this example, you can see that we actually start to pace really below where we need to be in order to hit our budget. But it's a good way to keep track of that. And if you are using this report on a daily basis, you're just going to have something on the left here that will just quickly show you, are you pacing to where you need to be? So let me lock this. All right, so let's start to fill in this section. So we're going to dedicate this kind of whole area to front-end metrics, spend, pacing, total spend, changes week over week. I'm just going to do targeting data in here. So how we're doing in terms of first-party targeting or third-party targeting when those placements that are hitting those people come to the site, or those users come to the site, how are they performing? So what we can do is I have this whole area down here in terms of targeting. And basically this is just segments that I created and saying any placements that I know contain retargeting or contain prospecting, or really anything, I want to bucket them together. So for this example, we don't really have that data set, but we have something called placement data. And I just said placement contains 1, placement contains 2. And this way, instead of reporting on a couple hundred placement names, you can bucket the themes into a targeting perspective. And this doesn't have to be placement. It could be your package level data. It could be your campaign level data. It could be your ad level data. Whatever is within that naming taxonomy, you can bucket into it. So for this example, I just want to get total spend and total revenue by those tactics. So highlight both of these. And I'll right click it with the donut. Let's stick this here. And I'll lock that. And then I want to take maybe a look at the CPMs. So I'll just visualize this with a bar graph. So like I said, if you notice, what I'm doing a lot of is just taking the raw data table, right-clicking on it, depending on how I want to visualize it, taking the data that way. So now we have a kind of a big gap here as well. So I usually like to keep everything in line. So this is my whole revenue area. Usually what I find helpful is what did I do for revenue yesterday? So I can start to build that out. Or maybe I want to look at week data. So what did we do for spend or revenue last week? So I go into my weekly data. I can say, well, April 21st in this example, I can right click it. I can visualize it, and then I can create a summary number. So this could be anything. It could be yesterday data. It could be 2 days ago data. Anything you want to keep a close eye on, you can look at that. So I can look at, I can lock it. I can then duplicate it. And I want to put my last week ROAS here. So I have total ROAS, and then I have last week ROAS. And just to fill in this little gap, so it's great to know that we're selling revenue, that we have revenue from last week, but what are we actually selling in terms of products? I can actually go into my product data, and this will let me know, since I have access to Adobe Analytics data set, is what products I'm actually selling. So I can highlight my top 10, I can visualize that, and I can make this a bar graph, or I can make it a donut chart or a line chart if you want to get data for a day over day. Let me take this, stick it here. So maybe you have revenue, but you want to actually put in conversion rate as well. So you can maybe just highlight all the data and it will update it. And just make sure you go and do a dual access. And you can say, don't limit my rows, and you're all set. So now you're seeing what products have the highest conversion rate for your AdCloud data. You can see total revenue by that as well. So by the end of this whole process, you have a report that looks kind of something like this, right? So it could be really anything. In this example around here, I'd spend revenue trended day over day. Here's my total revenue, a little bit bigger at the bottom. And then I'm all set to start to send this out. So I can go up here and I can hit share. And I can curate it, which will actually limit the data set to everything I used. And then I can say, well, let me send this on schedule as well. So I can say, let me do a PDF. I can add all the people who receive this, and I will say, send this once a week, Monday morning at 10 o'clock. And then you're all set. So in summary, we discussed the difference between a report and analysis. We set this report up for success by showing that we need to clearly define our KPIs. And then we jumped into Adobe Analytics, and I showed you some tricks and some tips in terms of how to create these very quickly. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys again soon.